You ever have one of those moments where it feels like your whole life is about to split in two and you're just standing there clueless with a hammer in your hand and a gut feeling that everything's about to change? That was me right there on the rotting porch of Bellwood Manor, a crumbling red brick pile at the end of a busted-up driveway, October wind howling through the trees, when Cordelia Waywright Blackwell made her grand entrance. I remember the screech of her white BMW, the angry slam of the door, the click, click, click of her designer heels on broken pavement, and the way her face burned red fury spilling off her in waves. You could feel it like static before a storm. Behind her, two men in matching polos trailed close, looked like henchmen, the kind who'd never say a word unless you told them to. That moment, I didn't know it yet, but it was the first shot in a war, not just any neighbor spat. This was the opening act of a brawl that would end up exposing more corruption, fraud, and naked greed than you'd believe. Hell, sometimes I still don't, and I lived it. But let me back up a sec, because stories like this, they don't really start with the fireworks. They start with the small stuff, with quiet decisions made in tired offices, with one person trying to keep a promise to the dead. Mine starts 3 weeks before that porch showdown, standing in the golden light of a late afternoon, staring up at Bellwood Manor for the very first time as its owner. That house, it looked half asleep, half haunted, red bricks smudged with lichen, those Greek revival columns leaning like old men with busted knees, the roof patched with slate tiles and wishful thinking. The place smelled like rain and memories, like a place that remembered everything and forgave nothing. And beneath all the rot, I could see at the bones of something magnificent, like a wounded animal holding on, just waiting for someone to wake it up. My name's Elliot Thorne Ashland. I was 37 that year. Yeah, not so young, but not old enough to know better either. I used to call myself an architectural archaeologist, spent years traveling the South, poking around old buildings, specializing in historic preservation. That was before my world collapsed. See, 2 years back, my wife Isabel died of cancer. It ate her up fast. Medical bills chewed through everything we'd saved. Then they took our house. After that, the future just vanished. For 2 years, I wandered a ghost in my own life. Some months, I'd pick up consulting gigs, patch a roof here, write a report there. Most nights, I slept in cheap motels or sometimes in my car, staring at the ceiling, wondering if that hollow ache in my chest would ever go away. And then one day out of nowhere, I saw the listing Bellwood Manor circa 1823 for sale through the county's Heritage Restoration Program. Price $3. I had to read it twice. The catch, though, there's always a catch. You had 3 years to restore it properly by the book. Fail, and the county takes it back. Most folks looked at that contract and saw a bottomless money pit. I looked at it and saw the last promise I could make to Isabel. I can still see the clerk's tired eyes as she slid the paperwork across her old oak desk. Mrs. Henderson, county clerk, she must have seen hundreds of dreamers like me come and go. She leaned in close, lowered her voice. 4 folks tried this property in the last 10 years, Mr. Ashland. None lasted more than 6 months. You know what you're signing up for? I just nodded, handshaking a little as I signed. That pen felt heavier than any sledgehammer. $3, no cents. Felt like signing my name to fate itself. She stamped the deed with a thud that echoed in my bones. Congratulations, she said almost kindly. You now own a 200-year-old money pit. And then she tapped a line at the bottom. Funny how these things hide in plain sight. One unusual clause here, she said. Subject to all covenants and restrictions of record, including Federal Preservation Covenant dated March 1872. I asked what it meant. She shrugged. No idea. Been in the records forever. Probably just old paperwork. Don't lose sleep over it. I jotted it down anyway, just in case. Call it habit or maybe superstition. That first day I walked through Bellwood's battered front door, the place groaned under my weight. The smell hit me like a punch-old rot wet plaster dust, older than my grandfather. But right away I could feel it. This house had survived things you and I couldn't imagine. 15-foot ceilings, carved rosettes so fine you wanted to cry, a spiral walnut staircase with steps worn thin by generations. Under the decay, the soul of the place still glowed stubborn and proud. That night I sat on the porch steps, digging through the glove box for Isabel's old sketchbook. 3 years back, we'd walked Bellwood together before cancer, back when it was just a daydream. She'd drawn it as she imagined: windows, glowing gardens, blooming columns, straight and strong. She'd scribbled at the bottom, "Some things are worth saving even when everyone says they're too far gone." I promised her right then I'd see this through for both of us. Next morning I tracked down Silas Harding, a carpenter who'd worked on Bellwood back in the 80s. 70 years old if he was a day, drove a Ford truck older than the house itself. Silas walked those rooms like a priest in a cathedral, fingers trailing the woodwork. "This place has good bones, son," he said, "but it'll fight you every inch." I smiled even as I swallowed hard. And so we began, me and Silas, a few battered tools and a mountain of hope. We started clearing junk, patching leaks, boarding up windows before winter set in. Every day the house revealed secrets, sometimes treasure, sometimes trouble. We found original medallions behind a false wall, lost half the roof joists to water damage in the attic. 2 steps forward, 3 back. But every morning I woke up with purpose, not just pain. On the 4th day, Bellwood delivered a neighbor in the form of Maeve Lucille Garrison, all of 83 and tough as hickory. She showed up with apple pie, said she'd lived in Magnolia Estates 40 years. First black family on the street, she told me back when. That still meant doors slammed in your face. She sat beside me looking out at the sagging porch and said, "This house, it's got a history most folks would rather forget." She told me how after the Civil War, the feds bought the place, turned it into a school for freed slaves' children. Her own grandmother learned to read in that parlor, she said, and later it became the hub for the black community, parties, meetings, hope, until it all just faded. Why would people want to forget that, I asked. She just shook her head, eyes old and sad. Because remembering means admitting, and some folks would rather live in the shadows of their own stories. She warned me too. People who run things around here, they got plans. They don't want you waking this place up. I asked who they were. She smiled, one of those tired, wise smiles you can't fake. "You'll meet 'em soon enough." That night I took a walk past the Magnolia Estates entrance, noticed the HOA bulletin board for the first time. Rules stacked on rules, no paint colors but approved ones, no fences above 4 feet, no unapproved landscaping, $500 a day fines for violations the board authorized to slap liens on your property. I snapped a photo, uneasy. Bellwood might have predated the HOA by a century, but those rules felt like knives aimed at my back. That night, for the first time in forever, I slept without nightmares. The old house creaked around me, but instead of haunting, it felt like company. I didn't know it then, but I had exactly 17 days before the war exploded. Cordelia Blackwell was already plotting. But that's the thing about hope, sometimes just having something to wake up for, something to fight for, is enough. That Saturday, everything seemed so normal you could almost forget the storm brewing. I was out on the porch working on the railings, humming some old tune Isabel used to love, sun warming my back when I heard the engine. Not just any car, mind you, a pearl white BMW gliding up my rutted driveway like it owned the place. Out stepped Cordelia Waywright Blackwell, head of the Magnolia Estates HOA. And the instant I saw her cashmere sweater sunglasses worth more than my truck heels stabbing the cracked concrete, I knew this wasn't a neighborly welcome. Trailing behind her were those 2 guys in matching polos, arms crossed, faces tight. She surveyed Bellwood the way a general surveys a battlefield, and I could already feel that old pit opening up in my stomach. I tried to play it cool, wipe my hands on my jeans. "Morning," I called. "Can I help you?" Cordelia peeled off her sunglasses, slow and deliberate. Her face was sharp, the kind you can't soften with money or makeup. "You must be the new owner." "I'm Cordelia Waywright Blackwell, president of the Magnolia Estates Homeowners Association. We need to talk." Her tone icy confident, like she'd rehearsed it in the mirror 1,000 times. I walked down the steps, felt the porch boards protest beneath me, tried to keep my voice even. Sure, what's this about? She didn't bother with small talk. What this is about, Mr. Ashland, is you violated at least 47 HOA regulations. This property is a disaster, and it's dragging down the value of every home in this community. She gestured, and one of her guys handed her a clipboard thick with paper. She shoved it at me, 15 pages of violations. Exterior paint non-compliant, even though the house wasn't painted at all. Lawn maintenance inadequate. There was no lawn, just weeds and wildflowers. Construction materials visible from the street, unapproved modifications. Failure to submit an architectural review application. Every violation racked up a $500 daily fine. My hands shook, not with fear, but with disbelief. Mrs. Blackwell, I'm working with the county on a historic preservation project. I have permits, a restoration timeline, approvals from the State Historic Commission. She cut me off, eyes flashing. I don't care what the county says. This is HOA property and we have standards, rules that everyone else follows. She leaned in, perfume thick and sweet, almost cloying. Let me be very clear, Mr. Ashland. My family has been in this area for 200 years. My grandfather was born in this house. This land belongs to my family, and you have no right to it. I felt my jaw clench. With all due respect, that's not legally accurate. I have a valid deed. The property was sold through a county program. She pulled out a leather folder, family genealogy, old photos, yellow documents like she was building a case right there on the driveway. The Wayrite line goes back to 1799 in South Carolina. This plantation, this land was built by my ancestors. The county made a mistake. That doesn't erase 2 centuries of heritage. She jabbed at the paper. According to HOA bylaws, we can reclaim properties that don't meet community standards. If you don't leave voluntarily, we'll force you out. Legally. I could feel the old part of me. The scientist waking up, look for the evidence, hold on to facts. Mrs. Blackwell, according to South Carolina Code Section 271610, I have clear legal title through the Heritage Restoration Program. The HOA doesn't have the power to override that. For just a flicker, barely a heartbeat, I saw something in her eyes. Surprise, fear. Then it was gone, replaced by a smug, cold smile. You think you're clever, don't you? Because you can quote some law. I have friends on the county commission. A lawyer who's handled more property cases than you've had birthdays. And I have this whole community behind me. How long do you think you can really last? I didn't answer. There was no point. She spun on her heel, ordered her men to follow, and as she slid into her BMW, I caught her saying, "Get Marcus on the phone. We're filing the lawsuit Monday." I stood there in a swirl of dust and dread, listening to the engine fade, heart thumping out of rhythm. It didn't take long for the whispers to start. By that evening, I could feel the neighborhood turning, people slowing their cars in front of Bellwood, conversations cutting off when I walked by. That's the thing about small towns, word spreads faster than wildfire. And then, as if on cue, Maeve called, "Child, you need to see something." Her voice shook in a way that scared me more than any threat. I drove to her house 3 blocks away, and she led me to her computer. Up on the screen, the Magnolia Estates message board. Top post. New resident threatening our community values. Cordelia had posted a diatribe, painted me as some outsider, accused me of manipulating county officials, of stealing historic property. She'd posted pictures of Bellwood looking like a haunted ruin, twisted the story to make me the villain. Hundreds of comments, each one sharper than the last. But the dagger was in the last paragraph. This property represents our heritage, our history, our community's foundation. My family built this area. We won't let one opportunistic stranger destroy what generations worked to preserve. I stared at the screen, sick. Maeve squeezed my shoulder. I told you they wouldn't let you be. Cordelia's been running this neighborhood like her own kingdom for 8 years. Anybody who crosses her gets crushed. She opened a shoebox, spread newspaper clippings and old photos in front of me. Look at this. Proof her family never owned Bellwood. They owned the plantation next door, sold it in 1920. She's been telling that lie so long I think she believes it herself. I thumbed through records, property deeds, historical letters, a note from 1963, describing Bellwood as the former Freedmen's Community Center. Nothing tied the way rights to my house. Why lie about something so easy to disprove, I asked. Maeve's face darkened. Because it's not about the house, child. There's money involved. Big money. She handed me a clipping. Megadev Corporation planning a $180 million development right on top of Magnolia Estates. Bellwood marked dead center. Cordelia's cousin was a VP at Megadev. If she can force you out, Maeve whispered, the HOA sells the land. Guess who buys it? It all snapped into focus. Heritage was a mask. This was about millions, and I was standing in the way. I drove home that night feeling like a boxer just off the ropes. But fear started hardening into anger. I laid out every document I had, the contract, the permits, Maeve's records, photos of the violations list. Somewhere in that stack had to be a weapon. And then I saw it, that little clause from the day I signed, subject to all covenants and restrictions of record, including Federal Preservation Covenant dated March 1872. Federal, not state. Not HOA. Federal. My heart kicked up. I fired up my laptop and started digging archives, databases, anything I could get into. Hours passed my eyes burning. And then just after midnight, I found it. A single line in the National Archives, Bellwood Plantation, South Carolina. Federal acquisition, 1865. Preservation covenant recorded 1872. Status active. Active, not expired, not voided, active. If that was true, the HOA had zero legal authority over Bellwood. Cordelia was about to find out that the law doesn't care who your grandfather was. But I needed proof. Ironclad. Courtroom quality. And I knew just where to start looking. The lawsuit landed on my porch a few days later, just like Cordelia promised, hand-delivered by a courier, thick as a brick and heavy as doom. Magnolia Estates Homeowners Association versus Elliott Thorne, Ashland. The complaint ran 43 pages, wall-to-wall, legalese, designed less to inform than to terrify. Violation of property covenants, creation of a public nuisance, diminution of neighborhood property values. The demands were blunt: either demolish Bellwood within 30 days or pay $250,000 in damages, money I didn't have and couldn't even imagine having. And that was just the opening volley. Over the next week, their attorney Marcus Ricks from Hendricks & Associates buried me in paperwork. Discovery demands, interrogatories with hundreds of questions about my finances and intentions, requests for every permit, every receipt, every scrap of evidence from the day I stepped foot on the property. It was an old trick, make the process itself the punishment, wear you down until you fold. What really got to me, though, wasn't the paperwork, it was the isolation. The way the neighborhood iced over, the way people's faces shut down when they saw me at the hardware store. Folks I'd never met would stop talking as I walked by. I started getting dirty looks, muttered insults. One morning I came out of the grocery store to find my truck's tires slashed. Cops took a report, but you could see in their eyes they weren't going to stick their necks out for me. Probably just kids, the officer said, but his eyes said, "You're on your own, son." Silas kept showing up, bless the man. Said he'd seen uglier than this, said we'd get through it. But word spread, and soon I couldn't get a contractor to return my calls. One plumber showed up, took one look at the address, and just shook his head. "Sorry, man. Can't risk the HOA blacklisting me. I need to work around here." Within 2 weeks, I was a pariah. The loneliness set in, thick and choking. Worse than those first months after Isabel died. At least then, folks offered sympathy. Now I got only contempt. Then came Cordelia's next move, a community town hall meeting. You've never seen a performance like it. 150 people packed into the Magnolia Estates Community Center on a Thursday night, faces set and cold. Cordelia took the podium, crisp white suit, the kind of posture that makes people listen even if they don't want to. She launched into a speech about protecting tradition responsibility to community standards, how one man's selfishness could destroy what generations had built. The lawyer got up, showed slides of Bellwood looking like a haunted ruin, graphs predicting plummeting property values, neighbors testifying about their fears and disgust. No one asked me to speak. No one even looked my way. The local paper ran a story the next morning: newcomer battles historic neighborhood over property dispute. They gave Cordelia paragraphs of quotes, but me, just one line. Mr. Ashland declined to comment, which was news to me since no one had even asked. That afternoon, the story went online and the comments piled up. People like him don't belong here. He should leave before he ruins everything. It was official. I was the villain in someone else's play. The breaking point came at the supermarket. I was in line, lost in my own world, when a woman stepped in front of me, 60-ish pearls at her neck, church volunteer type. She looked me up and down, then raised her voice so the whole line could hear. You should be ashamed of yourself. Decent people don't want you here. Why don't you take your Yankee attitude and leave our history alone? I wanted to say I was born in South Carolina. I'm not destroying history, I'm trying to save it. You've all been lied to. But what's the use when no one's listening? I left my groceries and walked out, sat in my truck, hands shaking so hard I couldn't put the keys in the ignition. That was the lowest point. Cordelia wasn't just trying to win legally, she wanted to break me, wanted me gone so she could bulldoze Bellwood and cash her cousin's check. And God help me, it almost worked. That night my phone rang, unknown number. I almost didn't answer. But a calm voice came through. Mr. Ashland, my name is Holden Everett. I'm an attorney with the Southern Poverty Law Center. I've been following your situation. I think we should talk. We met at a coffee shop in the next town, Neutral Ground. Holden was quiet, sharp-eyed, and he didn't waste words. I've seen this before, he said, laying out files. HOAs using their power to target minorities, single moms, anyone who doesn't fit their mold. What you're facing isn't just a property dispute, it's a pattern. Escalating violations, crushing fines, community pressure. We've documented 4 other families forced out of Magnolia Estates in the last 5 years. Elderly black couple, single mom with a work van, Latino family adding a wheelchair ramp. Every time the same playbook. Every time the properties ended up in Megadev's hands. He leaned in, intense. Your case could stop them. But we need proof. You mentioned a federal preservation covenant. If that's real, their lawsuit is dead in the water. But we have to find the original. For the next 3 days, Holden and I became detectives. County records, dusty ledgers, stacks of deeds and transfers going back 2 centuries. The chain of title was clear until 1872. That's where it got weird. The original federal deed was there plain as day. This property shall in perpetuity serve educational and community purposes for the benefit of freed persons and their descendants. But when the HOA was registered in 1994, the federal covenant vanished like someone had wiped it out. Look at this, I said, pointing to the signature on the 1994 document. The notary public, Robert Fletcher. Mean anything? Holden punched the name into his phone and his brow furrowed. Fletcher died in 1989, 5 years before this document was supposedly notarized. We looked at each other, realization dawning. The HOA's deed, their foundation, was a forgery. Someone had erased the covenant, stamped it with a dead man's signature, and pretended it was all above board. We need to go to the FBI, Holden said, his voice low and grim. This isn't just a property dispute, it's fraud, it's obstruction of justice. But before that, we had to follow the money, find out who profited from this scheme. That night, back at Bellwood, for the first time in weeks, I felt something like hope. Cordelia thought she'd buried me, but every swing she took just made me fight harder. Her empire was built on lies, and now we had the cracks. Next morning, I got in my truck and headed for Charleston, the National Archives branch. The place smelled like old paper and possibility. I asked for Freedmen's Bureau records, 1865 to 1875. The librarian wheeled out boxes of microfilm, and I settled in scrolling through faded documents for hours. And then I found it. Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen, and Abandoned Lands Purchase Record, April 1865, Bellwood Plantation, acquired by the federal government for the establishment of educational facilities for freed persons. And then, March 1872, the covenant property shall be maintained in perpetuity for educational and community benefit of colored citizens and their descendants. This covenant shall run with the land and bind all future owners. I photographed everything, every page, every signature. Holden's voice shook when I called him. "Can you get certified copies already requested?" I told him. But while I waited on those, I kept digging. $50 got me Megadev's corporate records. There it was, the HOA attorney on the board of directors, the county commissioner holding 12% of shares. Same commissioner who'd tried to buy my place for pennies. It stunk. Then an anonymous email, a godsend. Screenshots of internal messages Cordelia to her cousin at Megadev. "Once we clear the Ashland problem, the land is ours. $2.3 million split is agreed." The commissioner's reply, "I'll handle the county side. Make sure HOA does its part. The attorney legal pressure is working. He'll cave soon." There it was in black and white. Racketeering, fraud. I sent it all to Holden. He replied within minutes, "This is RICO territory. I'm alerting the FBI." The fight was about to get real. 2 weeks later, everything hit a new level of crazy. Holden called me late one night, said the FBI wanted to meet. Next thing I knew, I was sitting in a conference room that smelled like burnt coffee and old carpet nerves stretched tight. An agent in a Navy suit flipped through the evidence, the forged deed with the dead notary, the old covenant from 1872, emails spelling out conspiracy records of families forced out and properties funneled to Megadev. He didn't say much at first, just let the facts pile up between us. "This is substantial," he said, finally tapping the folder. "But federal investigations take time. Until we have enough to act, you're still in danger." He looked me dead in the eyes. People who commit fraud on this scale, they don't stop when you catch them. They escalate. If you see anything suspicious, you call me directly. Don't go to local police. Some of them might be compromised. That night I didn't sleep. I lay on my cot staring at the ceiling, heart thumping, trying to decide if this was still a fight I could win, or if I was just putting a target on my back. Holden and I worked around the clock, piecing together the story, every legal document, every newspaper clipping, Maeve's affidavit interviews with families who'd been forced out. The attorney drafted 3 filings, a federal complaint to invalidate the HOA's claim a civil rights lawsuit for discrimination, and a report to the FBI detailing document fraud and racketeering. Friday afternoon, we filed them all federal district court, FBI Department of Justice. "Now we wait," Holden said, slumping in his chair, "and we brace for them to hit back." And hit back they did. The HOA's attorney filed an emergency motion in the local court to block federal action, screeching about state sovereignty and federal overreach. Cordelia called another community meeting, riling up the neighborhood about outsiders stealing our land. The rhetoric got ugly spray paint on Bellwood's front door. "Go home." One night, a brick shattered the library window, landing just 3 feet from where I slept. But something else was happening too. The local paper ran a follow-up this time, quoting Holden, laying out the fraud, the covenant, the names. For the first time, the comments were different. People were asking questions. Why was the covenant hidden? If the notary was dead, who forged the deed? How much money were these people making? The tide ever so slightly began to turn. Cordelia knew it. I saw it in her face the next time I passed her at the county building, hatred pure and simple burning through the mask. "You're going to regret this," she hissed, heels cracking against the tile as she marched away. Within 5 days, everything began to unravel. Monday morning, 7:33 a.m., black SUVs pulled up to the HOA office. FBI agents with windbreakers and badge lanyards. I wasn't there. But Maeve called me out of breath, voice trembling with excitement. "Child, you need to see this. They're raiding the HOA office." I parked across the street and watched as agents hauled out boxes of paperwork, computers, filing cabinets. Cordelia was outside, pale and frantic, phone glued to her ear. The HOA's attorney tried to interfere. An agent waved a warrant in his face. The search lasted hours. By noon, news vans circled the block. That afternoon, I got a certified letter from the Department of the Interior. My hand shook as I opened it. Dear Mr. Ashland, we are pleased to inform you that Bellwood Manor has been designated to the National Register of Historic Places under emergency procedures due to its significance as one of 12 remaining Freedman School buildings with original structure intact. Effective immediately, the property is under federal protection. All previous local ordinances, covenants, and restrictions are hereby superseded by federal authority. Attached to the letter was a check, $300,000, a federal grant for restoration. I sat on those porch steps, the autumn wind swirling around me, and just sobbed. Not just relief, though God knows I felt it, but something deeper. Vindication. Isabel had been right. Some things really were worth saving. But the battle wasn't over yet. That evening, Cordelia called an emergency meeting at her house. Her attorney, the commissioner, all the key players except the FBI was already listening. The next morning, the agent called. They're panicking. They're plotting legal maneuvers, but they're trapped and they know it. I thought that'd be the end of it. But desperate people don't surrender. That night, I woke to the sound of glass breaking. Not a brick this time, footsteps, someone inside the house. I grabbed my phone and the old bat I kept by the cot. I've called the police. I yelled into the dark. The steps retreated fast, car engine, squealing tires fading into the night. Sheriff's deputies showed up 20 minutes later, took a statement, but their faces were tight guarded. Looks like attempted burglary, one said, but the words hung hollow. I called the FBI agent, just like he'd said. He was there within the hour, even though it was 2 a.m. This is intimidation, he said, photographing everything. They want to scare you into leaving before the arrests. He looked me in the eye. We're executing warrants on Friday. I wanted you to know because you should be there. Where I asked, they're holding another emergency HOA meeting. Trying to vote you out. They don't know we're coming. We're going to arrest them in front of everyone. Not standard procedure, but the public needs to see it. Accountability. Friday morning dawned bright and cold. I dressed carefully, almost like for battle or a funeral, maybe both. Holden drove me to the community center, gripped my shoulder before we went in. Stay calm, don't react, let the evidence speak. The place was packed, 250 people, faces full of judgment and nerves. Cordelia took the stage, immaculate as ever, her voice honeyed but hollow. We gather today, she said, to protect what our families built, our traditions, our heritage. We will not let one man's selfishness threaten what generations have preserved. People nodded, some cheered. Then the attorney stood, rattled off a list of violations, explained their legal plan to expel me, contest the federal designation, offer a fair market value buyout to settle things peacefully. It was theater, but the crowd ate it up. And then just as they were about to vote, the back doors swung open. 5 FBI agents walked in, badges on display, the lead agent's voice booming, Federal Bureau of Investigation. Apologies for the interruption, but we have business here that can't wait. You could hear a pin drop. They set up a laptop and projector, started showing evidence. First, the National Register designation, Bellwood's history, the federal covenant. Then the forensic analysis. The notary who'd certified the HOA deed was dead 5 years before it was filed. The ink was manufactured in 2003. It was a forgery. The crowd gasped. People turned on the attorney who'd gone gray and silent. Then came the emails. Cordelia and her cousin at Megadev. The money splits, the bribes, the pattern of families forced out. The conspiracy was laid bare for all to see. The lead agent turned to Cordelia. Cordelia Waywright Blackwell, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, racketeering, and witness intimidation. Cordelia's mask shattered. She screamed rage and disbelief, the old script gone. This is my land. My family built this community. You can't. 2 agents moved in, cuffed her, read her rights as she howled and stumbled, heels scraping across the floor. Next, the attorney arrested for forgery and obstruction of justice. Then the commissioner, bribery, abuse of office, conspiracy. Each one marched out through a stunned crowd, cameras flashing. Holden, calm as ever, took the podium. Before you judge Mr. Ashland, understand what happened here. He bought a historic property legally. He was harassed, threatened, and nearly destroyed by people who saw him as an obstacle to their profit. He didn't fight with violence. He fought with truth and justice prevailed. He called me up and my legs nearly buckled, but I made it to the front. I didn't come here for revenge, I told them, voice shaky but strong. I came to save a piece of history. Bellwood Manor was never the way right home. It belonged to freed slaves, to community members, to a history we're supposed to remember. What happened to me happened to 4 other families before me. That ends now. Bellwood will open as a community center and museum, free to everyone, just like it was meant to be. Some folks clapped hesitant at first. Then Maeve stood, tears in her eyes, and the applause swelled. Not everyone joined in, but enough to fill the room with hope. Outside, the arrested were loaded into cars, media buzzing. For once, I didn't feel like the villain, just tired and grateful and free. Time didn't freeze after that. It rolled on stubborn as ever. But now there was a current of hope running through everything at Bellwood. Some days I'd stand at the window, mug of coffee, warming my hands, just listening, children's voices in the garden, volunteers chatting as they painted fences or hauled boxes of old books, Maeve on the phone in the office next door, wrangling another city permit. That house, once heavy with ghosts, was filling up with life, with laughter, with the steady thrum of people trying, sometimes awkwardly, sometimes beautifully, to heal the damage that had almost torn us all apart. Every month brought new faces and new stories. I met the grandson of a freedman school teacher who'd driven all the way from Mississippi just to see the place where his family had started over after emancipation. I watched a group of middle schoolers trace their fingers over the old names carved into the attic beams, quiet with wonder. Once a retired teacher who'd been forced out by the old HOA rules returned for a book club meeting and just stood in the hall, eyes shining as if she was seeing forgiveness written into the walls. We kept finding things too tucked behind baseboards, hidden in crawl spaces, sealed inside walls. Faded class photos, church bulletins from the 20s, a tin box stuffed with ration coupons from the war years, yellowed graduation certificates, a child's handmade rag doll missing one button eye. Every find went into the museum's archive, each one a thread in the story that was bigger than any one of us. Some weekends I'd just sit on the floor with the latest trove, piecing together the past one memory at a time. Of course, not everyone was eager to join the parade. A few folks still avoided me at the hardware store, faces, shuttered arms folded across their chests. There were board members who grumbled about outsiders and changed neighbors who muttered that the community had lost its soul. But those voices faded as months went by, and Bellwood stood strong, no longer a symbol of conflict, but of endurance, of coming together. And sometimes I'd see even the harshest critics wandering the museum, silent and thoughtful, their kids tugging at their sleeves, asking questions that couldn't be answered by anger or nostalgia. The new HOA under Maeve's watch transformed from a force of control into one of service. Meetings became open forums, sometimes rowdy, always honest. Budgets posted in the community center window. Every big decision went to a vote, and volunteers, not hired enforcers, kept the grounds clean. Maeve set up a Heritage Day each spring, inviting former residents and their families back to share their stories. I can still see the look on her face the first time a woman whose family had been forced out came home, tears streaming as she was hugged and welcomed by neighbors old and new. Bellwood's impact kept rippling outward. High school students did oral history projects there. The local college sent archaeology interns every summer, eager to learn from the old house with a new heartbeat. Even the State Historical Society took notice, publishing a feature and sending grants for further preservation. The National Park Service invited me to speak at a conference about the legal precedent of the federal covenant case, and I watched as rooms full of lawyers, historians, and activists scribbled notes hungry to replicate what had happened in our little corner of South Carolina. For me, the real miracle was personal. The ache in my chest that had followed me since Isabel's death, the weight of all those silent, sleepless nights began to ease, not gone, not forgotten, but gentler, like a river that learns to bend. Therapy helped, sure, but it was the work, the building, the digging, the connecting that stitched me back together. I started running again, slow and clumsy, at first feet pounding the old paths Isabel and I had walked when Bellwood was just a dream. Sometimes I'd talk to her out loud, feeling silly and comforted in equal measure. "Look at this place, Izzy. You wouldn't believe it." Other times I'd just listen, letting her memory fill the quiet spaces. And new connections formed too, little by little. I started having dinner with Maeve and her daughter's family on Sundays, the house noisy with kids and casseroles. I reconnected with old friends, hosted a poker night in the library. The laughter echoing off the rafters felt like an exorcism. I even let myself go on a few dates. Nothing earth-shattering, just gentle reminders that life could open up again if I let it. Bellwood became a magnet, drawing in people who needed second chances. Ex-cons looking for honest work. A veteran with PTSD who found solace in gardening, a teenager who'd been caught tagging buildings, now painting murals in the community room. Nobody was perfect, but nobody needed to be. And on quiet nights when the last visitor had gone and the house settled into its bones, I'd walk the halls, hand trailing over smooth wood and chipped paint, thinking about the long chain of hands that had kept this place alive. The struggle, the joy, the sorrow, it was all part of the story. And now finally I could breathe easy, knowing I'd helped write a chapter worth reading. So if you ever pass through Magnolia Estates, look for the red brick house with the wide porch and the laughter spilling out the open windows. That's Bellwood Manor. That's the place $3 bought me not just a home, but a community, a calling, and a future I never thought I'd see. Because sometimes the fight isn't just to save what's old, it's to make something new together from the ashes. And I'll tell you what, if you ever find yourself standing at a crossroads, pen in hand, heart full of doubt, wondering if it's worth the risk, take it from me. Some things are always worth saving.